Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a new TMS meeting. Today we have a chemistry journal club, and it's about the synthesis of 2D porous crystalline materials in simulated microgravity. And it's presented by Gemma Llauradó from the University of Barcelona in Spain. So Gemma received her bachelor degree in chemistry and her master degree in applied materials chemistry at the University of Barcelona. And in September 2022, she started her PhD at the same university. And her research is focused on the investigation and development of functional materials, mainly covalent organic frameworks and metal organic frameworks. And the synthesis of these systems is performed through microfluidic technologies in order to control the self-assembly process of these materials. So, Gemma, when you are ready, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Um, I'm going to share the screen. I hope you can see it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I will start. So today in this journal club, I will be presenting this paper. This paper has this title, Synthesis of 2D Porous Crystalline Materials in Simulated Microgravity. These are the authors that contributed to this work, and this paper was published in Advanced Materials Science, in Advanced Materials, in 2021. So first of all, I would like to start by introducing a little bit what COVs and MOVs are. So COVs are covalent organic frameworks. Wait. COVs are covalent organic frameworks. These are class of materials that can be two-dimensional or three-dimensional, and they are built from organic building blocks. So the characteristics of these type of materials are the crystallinity and also their porosity. So depending on which building blocks you're using, you can modulate these, like the pore size and the properties, let's say, of these materials. So covalent organic frameworks are uh, let's say, connected or bonded through covalent bonds, as you can see in this image, which is in contrast with metal organic frameworks, because metal organic frameworks are built between metal atoms and organic linkers through coordination bonds. So the characteristics of these materials are the same. They have to be crystalline and have to have these kind of porosity. So the applications of these COVs and MOVs are in many fields. You can find them in catalysis, in um, gas sorption processes, gas separation processes, in also in biomedical fields. So um, are pretty interesting materials. So after this introduction, the let's say the problem of not the problem, but a challenge of these materials is that they have to be crystalline, and it's important to control their synthesis. So we as chemists, we usually perform the reactions in bulk. This means that we usually steer we employ these steering things, and we are working under turbulent conditions. This results in a poor control of convective transfer processes that sometimes can affect in our reaction. Sometimes they can, like, our reaction products can precipitate from the solution, and this can have an effect on the reaction performance. So to obtain these kind of materials, it's this process, let's say, it's pretty critical. Um, However, what happens in microgravity? So I have this video found on YouTube that um, shows a little bit the idea of microgravity. Um, so in this case, they show you how proteins are crystallized in um, synthesized in microgravity. Um, so this is what happens on Earth. Um, you see this convection that sometimes forms this kind of defects. But in contrast, in microgravity, you see that these convection currents are absent, and that as a result, you can have fewer defects. So as you can see, this is more or less the idea of the crystallization in these conditions. And we have, with microgravity, we have these convection-free mass transfer processes occurring, and that can result in larger crystalline domain sizes, in lower defect densities, and probably in new morphologies. So after after this introduction, I wanted to point these some drawbacks of space research that include mainly the restricted access of microgravity environment on a regular basis, potentially the sample degradation due to launch delays, the crystal degradation as a consequence of these delays, the whole paperwork for flight approval regarding the samples, the uncertainty related to space flight, and also the cost of altogether. So as solution, let's say, to these microgravity conditions, to have access to these conditions, are microfluidic technologies. So I've put here some definition of microfluidics, which is the science and technology of systems that process or manipulate small amounts of fluids using channels with dimensions of tens to hundreds of micrometers. So I would like first to show you the specific device that they use in this paper, which is this one that they say that it can simulate microgravity mimicking conditions. So for that, this is the exact device. This one is built between like a top clamp and a bottom clamp made from aluminum. Inside, there's a chamber where you can place your quartz slides, for example, your substrates, and these are separated by a spacer, a PDMS spacer. As you can see, here are two connectors, which allow the, let's say, the filling of the chamber. This is these are two images from like the top view and the side view of the device. And as you can see, there's a little window that allows you to control, let's say, what happens inside of the chamber. So this is the device that they will be using in this paper. And I would like to mention a little bit the physical properties of that. So this device works with low Grashof numbers. It allows you to work in advection premixing. You can obtain these defined concentration gradients. You have this little gravity effect. And also you have this high surface area to volume ratio. So this allows you as an advantage to produce these large defect-free films. Because of that window, you can also characterize the reaction in situ, and you can also manipulate the reagents while filling the chamber. Some drawbacks of these devices are that it requires custom-made reactors, so maybe it takes time and design and everything, and it's still in its infancy, so probably there will be great developments in the future. So because of that, I would like to mention some simulations that they performed when comparing what happens in a droplet scenario versus in this microfluidic device. So what they did here was to check what happens in the droplet regarding the velocity and concentration. So in the droplet, we have convection. So the fluid elements move inward and like in the upper surface, but outward in the near the substrate. Like you have to imagine that there's a substrate here. And regarding the concentrations, you see that the less dense solute accumulates in the upper part of the droplet and the denser solute in the bottom part. So there's this concentration front horizontally that moves downward towards the substrate, but this also indicates that the reaction takes place here, probably, so that some products can be formed already in the droplet, and when it touches the substrate, it has already been like formed. So in contrast, in the microfluidic device, the simulations show that there is this reduction of the convective mass transport, which is important. And also that regarding the concentration, you don't have this horizontal concentration anymore. You have this vertical concentration front that moves horizontally along the substrate length. So this means that the reaction can take place like on the substrate, let's say. So these simulations show that you can actually have these convection-free mass transport conditions that are also present in microgravity conditions. So after like explaining a little bit this part, I want to show you the first synthesis that they have performed in the paper. They chose the synthesis of the nickel HITP MOF, the formation of thin films. So these are the two precursors. It is a MOF because it contains this nickel atom. Well, let's say this metal organic framework. Um, and this reaction requires a two-step vapor-induced crystallization reaction, first with an ammonia atmosphere for 1 day, and then with an oxidant gas, an air atmosphere, for 3 days. So they chose this the synthesis of this MOF for different reasons. So the first one is because when you perform this reaction in bulk, the growth is difficult to control since it precipitates from the solution, and this can affect in a bad way, let's say, the like the reaction. Also, it has been shown to be a conductive MOF, but the way that they have synthesized and observed these properties are in specific conditions, like in vacuum or in an inert atmosphere, or under like pressurized, like in pellets, let's say, applying pressure. And also, there's not a way to systematically control the diffusion of the gases in bulk. So because of these reasons, when it is synthesized inside this microfluidic device, in the case of employing a quartz substrate, we observe that after the first step, there's like this pink intermediate that it's formed. And then finally you have, after the air atmosphere, you obtain this black thin film that is due to the nickel HITP MOF. So in contrast, when you do this in bulk, what happens? So this is like the nickel and HITP, like the ligand, that has this the particular color. Once you put it in the ammonia, you observe this pink color, and again, once the MOF is formed, you observe the black characteristic color. However, if you compare these two steps, like these two synthetic approaches, through UV-Vis spectroscopy, you can see the difference. So when you perform this reaction in this microfluidic synthesis inside the device, when we have these controlled conditions, you observe this characteristic band at 1000 after the ammonia atmosphere. That corresponds to the non-oxidized complex, this intermediate, let's say. But then that this band gradually decreases, and instead the characteristic band of the nickel HITP MOF is formed, which is around 530 nanometers. So this shows that we have a control over the oxygen diffusion, as well as the ammonia, let's say. But in the case of the bulk synthesis, you see that already and at the beginning, we have this band here that is characteristic of this nickel HITP MOF. And we can observe that we have this fast precipitation of black particles, and we don't have control over the oxygen diffusion in bulk. So after showing these results from the paper, they characterized this MOF film with SEM. Well, this is an image of the film, the formed film. So after that, they characterized the film with SEM and GWAX. So they showed that they could generate smooth, compact, and crack-free films. So in the GWAX pattern also showed that they obtained crystalline structures. And instead, if you show, like if showing the bulk synthesis results, you observe that you have a lot of roughness, you have less compact films, and also there's not an orientation. Let's say it doesn't, like, it's irregular. So then what they did, because the MOF are conductive, and they wanted to after that check the electronic properties of these films. What they did was to extend this approach to gold substrates and to functionalized gold substrates with amino terminated self-assembled monolayers. So the reason of gold and this was because of specific reasons. The gold because they wanted a conductive surface. And then they wanted to see if by introducing these amino terminated self-assembled monolayers, they were able to, let's say, induce some crystallographic or like a preferential orientation on the formation of the crystals. So I don't know if you are let's say, familiar with self-assembled monolayers. I was not, so I looked at what were they, and basically this is a video that I found in YouTube that shows how these self-assembled monolayers are formed on a gold substrate. So these contained some thiols groups that are easy to functionalize with gold, and then also this amino terminated SAM should actually induce, sorry, should react probably with the formed films on top, with probably the nickel atoms, or with hydrogen bonds from the ligand. So this is what they were expecting to see. For that, to really control, let's say, the functionalization of these self-assembled monolayers on gold, they perform some contact angle measurements that show the different behavior of what happens on, like, on the gold, on bare gold, and on gold with these functionalized SAMs. So also they perform some IR spectra that clearly shows the absence of the vibrations of ace bonds, so that it indicates that the thiol group is linked to the substrate. So after doing some characterizations about these substrates, what they did was to again synthesize the MOF film on, like, in these microfluidic devices, but now they compared the results, the SEM and GWAX results, to the already synthesized MOF films on quartz substrate. So as you can see here, if we compare the results between the MOF on quartz and the MOF on gold, we observe that they have a similar morphology, let's say, and also the film that was formed was around 100 nanometers in thickness, and the GWAX pattern, I will not enter in a lot of detail, but the peaks that were more intense showed that what they had first, they had the same crystallographic orientation, and the peaks that were more intense showed that or indicated that the MOF film or the layers of MOF were built parallel to the substrate as it is shown here in this image. However, in the case of gold SAM substrates, we already observed that the SEM results are, or images are like totally different. So they have a different morphology. Also, the AFM in the supporting indicates that it's more rough, the film that is formed on top, but also from the GWAX pattern, they observed that there was a different crystallographic orientation, so that the self-assembled monolayers actually induce this preferential orientation, so that in the end the morph layers were, let's say, oriented perpendicularly to the substrate. So as it is shown in the image. Um, then in the paper also they performed some electrical measurements on these morph films. So I have attached here some of the images that show how they prepared the films. So first, because I have shown these results that they had, where the quartz substrates and the gold substrates had the same morphology and same orientation and etc. So in this case, what they did was to use a quartz substrate where they first sputtered some gold electrodes on top. And after the gold electrodes were deposited, they performed the reaction on top of that. So they built the muffin on top of the gold and the quartz. This is an image of how it should look like. And what they did here was to measure the in-plane conductivity and the out-of-plane conductivity. So for the in-plane, they measured it directly. For the out-of-plane, they had to put another gold electrode on a Kapton tape on top of the pre-patterned gold electrodes. So the results or the measurements show that for the in-plane conductivity, they could obtain a very high conductivity value, let's say. For the out-of-plane, it was not the case. So this, like in summary, it shows that the MOF film has a good packing, and that between the out-of-plane and the in-plane conductivity measurements, there is a high anisotropy factor. So this anisotropy factor is, let's say, not similar, but reminds us on graphene. And also, if they have, well, in the supporting, they compare the reported conductivity values of this MOF film prepared in different conditions. So these two are the ones that they did in this work. The other ones were reported values, but that they synthesized this material in vacuum or in like pellets. So this is what I was explaining before, that they showed this high conductivity value in like at room temperature in ambient conditions without applying pressure or to prepare the reaction to perform the reaction in vacuum or so. So then, to extend this approach to other materials, what they did was to synthesize a different material, which is a COF film. This one is the TAP BTCA COF film, which is known to the COF, which is an imine-based COF. In this case, you see these two precursors that they, well, the reaction required an acetone to stabilize the two monomers, and after that, an annealing step with this mixture. So this reaction was performed in a microfluidic device. In this case, because they were using acetone as a solvent, they had to use another device that was resistant to that solvent. So in this case, they used this device that is, let's say, different. You have this top clamp made of PIC, the bottom clamp made of stainless steel. There has like inside this top clamp, there's like a chamber, 200 micrometer chamber in height that you can place the substrate inside. So after that, you close the device with screws, and here you can see the confined reaction space where the reaction takes place. So this is an image showing like where you can see the chamber, how it is sealed, and through these inlet and outlet ports that you can see also here, the chamber can be filled. So after showing you the microfluidic device that was used here, they performed this characterization of these tab BTCA thin films. First, they performed the reaction on quartz. They characterized it by SEM, by AFM and GWAX. The SEM shows these smooth thin films that can be formed thanks to this microfluidic approach. The AFM also shows the low roughness that of these films, and the GWAX shows you that the crystalline material that is formed in these conditions. Then they tried different substrates. They used silicon substrates and graphene substrates. They again did the same. They characterized it by SEM, AFM, and GWAX. The roughness of the films were really low. And again, similar results were obtained because of that. If they, when they performed the same reaction in bulk, what they observed was what I've shown here, if the case in which you introduce substrate inside the vial. So when they performed the reaction like this, they characterized it by STM, and what they observed were the formation of these spheres. So which is a very typical known morphology of the tab BTCA cuff, like synthesized in bulk. So again, there's like this proof that you can change the cuff morphology in this case, and you can have a controlled, let's say, you can have control over the morphology of the material. So having said all of these, in conclusion, you can see that from the paper, they were able to generate these space-like experimentation conditions on Earth by means of these microfluidic devices that I've shown. Also, the microgravity effects, they had a favorable effect on the controlled growth of crystalline matter. And also, this can be extended to other systems, and these allow you to study new materials or play a little bit with the formation of new materials. So in my opinion, this is a very good paper. So first of all, because of the engineering point of view and the design of the microfluidic device, the conditions that you can obtain inside the device, that helps you to study what happens with like the crystallization in those conditions without having to send the sample in space. Also, I think it's a very good paper for regarding all the characterization techniques that they have uh, shown. I think it's very complete. They have many evidences in the supporting that also you can check, for example, the simulations and everything in general. And so in conclusion, I think these are some revolutionary advances in science. So because all of that, I think it's a quite good paper. So yeah, this is everything from my side. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for joining in this journal club. And that's it. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. And yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Gemma, for the presentation. It was very interesting. And like she said, if you have any questions, you can ask her or you can write them in the chat and I'll read them. So we have a question in the chat from Sarah. Thank you for your very nice presentation and for accepting my invitation to have this talk today. I am having a connection problem, so I'm not sure if I told you that at the beginning. What about the potential application of these interesting systems?
The potential application. I think, well, it depends. It depends on which material you are looking and what properties you can observe. in these microgravity conditions, but COVs and MOVs in general are known to be used in catalysis, for example. Also, they are known to be used in gas separation processes that are very important. This is mainly due to the porosity, since, as I was saying, with the building blocks, you can modulate the pore size. So maybe you can, I don't know, use these in energy in I don't know to as membranes to filter specifically molecules. I don't know. So I think that in general it's so diverse that it depends on the material itself. While doing it in microgravity, maybe you can observe differences in the properties. So for example, as I was showing this nickel HITP MOF, that you can only obtain these electrical or these high conductivity values in these harsh conditions, let's say, like if you press pellets or so. So I don't know. I think that it depends. It depends, but it can be used in many things. So I don't know.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question from Professor Teti.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay,
Yeah.
good. So, Gemma was very clear. I'm impressed because I'm not in the field and I could follow quite well. And my question actually was exactly the one that Sarah asked. So I thought it was a naive question. Instead, it was not. But on this, building on this, is there any application for this new material that we need for instance, for the microsips or this type of things in replacement of the lithium or these metals that are so dangerous? Or do you think that it's not possible?
Sorry, could you repeat again? If there's like a way to I didn't hear it quite nicely. Only the
So
I
perhaps there
only
is
heard
some noise. Yeah, it's better. Is it better now?
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now the point is that you can use this technique to build some new materials, new devices. For instance, to replace the
Mm.
microchips with the lithium that it's so dangerous.
Oh.
So I don't know if this is possible.
Yeah, well, actually, I've seen that there are some materials that you can use, for example, in cups or mops, that you can use them for wastewater treatment. So, for example, I don't know as any specific case, but they have been used in this kind of area. So, you can also let's say that by modulating the pore size and by changing the building blocks, and you can actually form the crystal ideally as you want, uh, with a lot of well, with a lot of challenge, but ideally you can design what the material like. And so depending, like it's you need like a specific target. If you want to remove, I don't know, chromium from from water. So maybe I don't know exactly what can be done, but probably there are some papers that can show how they employ these kind of materials on these uh,
Yeah,
dangerous.
I think it's
Yeah.
all work for you guys, you young people. So maybe in the future there are new applications, and we can
Mm.
have this world working better. Another question that I have: is there any, say, biological application, meaning making substrates, for instance, to make complex systems in vitro, or new ways how to culture cells on new substrates? Is that anything that is going in science, in your science, or?
Yeah, actually, I think, well, microfluidics itself, it's more or less, well, there's this part of microfluidics that works with lab on a chip and is more like bio oriented. But in the case of the synthesis in simulated microgravity, let's say in these kind of devices, I don't think for now, I don't think there's a lot going on. But maybe it's a way to start a new thing and to do research on this topic. Also, in the case of MOFs, these have been shown to be applied in biomedical fields, and also some, let's say, heterostructures where MOFs and cuffs can be synthesized and applied in these areas. But specifically, I don't know any case now. I think that there was in thin films. I don't know. There was one case where they tried kind of MOF structure on the. I think it was for the glucose oxidation. I'm not quite sure.
Mhm.
Something like this. But there are like a lot of things in biomedical field on that. With this
Oh,
approach, I don't know, but for MOFs, yes, for sure.
yeah. No, I think there is a future also in biological application, in medical applications, and so on. So I think that this is the way to go. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I also have a question. It's not related to the paper, but in general on these devices. And do you think that these microfluidic devices one day could be actually used in industries, for example?
In industries,
Mm.
I think there are industries that work with it, but I don't know. Like for example, for in this paper, for the synthesis that they do, I don't think there's a lot of work to be done so that it can be like scaled up. I don't know if it could be possible, but I think that it's a recently new field that has a lot of potential, I think, and that for now they have been not doing it in material science. They have been doing like microfluidics was more focused on other fields, not on in materials or synthesis of things. It was more regarding with the question that like the previous professor said, it was more in the bio field. So I think that it can it can be very interesting, and but it's still very new and still needs a lot of development, I think. So um this is my opinion, but yeah.
Thank you very much. And if I think there are no more questions, I can see them in the chat. Okay, so thank you, Jem, again for the presentation. And before closing the meeting, I would like to remember you about the TMS Day of Science. It's on the 24th of November, and you can send your abstract until this Sunday. So send your abstract and join the TMS Day of Science. Okay, so thank you again, and bye.
Bye.